Rangefinders have been a thing for 70 or so years, and Leica have been leading that charge for the majority of that time. They have the same commitment and passion for this type of camera as your grandparents has hatred for the immigrants. It's a great system for keeping your camera and lens combination nice and discreet and fairly small. However, it's not great for your wallet though. This is a specific kind of camera hobby and niche where lawyers, dentists, finance bros kind of tend to thrive. That, or you spend more money on this than you do on your partner's engagement ring. This brand's often regarded as a bit of a fashion accessory. You know, people want to buy it so they can look cool and stand out. It's a bit of a statement piece. If you think this is going to draw the eyes of guys or girls and be a conversation starter like that, you are sorely mistaken. That is, unless you're after the eyes of older white men. Hey man, can we get a photo together? Ah, yeah, sure. It's a good spot over here. This photo is going to go so hard. So let me frame up here. Okay. You got it yet? I can't hold this pose forever. Almost got it. Yep, almost got it, guys. Come on. 3, 2, 1. I got it, cool. Oh crap, that one's blurry. Okay, just give me 1 sec here. All right. Hey, can you stop moving? It makes it really hard to do this. You don't want the photo anymore? I'm sick of waiting. Being in the system, it's kind of like being in a cult. When you walk past someone and you don't have any sort of verbal interaction, there's often a bit of a... Most of the time, you or other people would think if you spend more money on your camera, your photos are definitely going to get better, right? And in some cases that's true, others it's not. In this case, they're probably going to get worse. That is, unless you're familiar with this kind of shooting system. Otherwise, it's a pretty steep learning curve and your photos are almost definitely going to be worse than if you used a much cheaper autofocus, modern mirrorless, or even DSLR camera. Hey, that's a pretty fancy camera. How much is something like that worth? Oh, well, it's worth around 6,000 bucks. Whoa, why is it worth so much? Is it special? Can it do something that other cameras can't? Well, not really. The best part about buying this camera and getting into the system is probably also the worst part. You finally get to the point where you have enough money to buy it and then you realize, crap, don't have any money to buy a lens. However, thankfully, the 70 years worth of lenses that you can put on this camera since the M mount has been unchanged and been a thing for so long. Whether you're interested in a sharp, budget, stylistic, small, optically perfect lens, the world is your oyster. Personally, I enjoy shooting 50mm. I like seeing outside of my given frame, knowing what I'm possibly missing, what may or may not be about to enter the scene. Personally, I've just had the most fun with that. Now, I watched a lot of videos and read a lot of stuff before I bought this camera, and I'm just going to talk about some of the things that were talked about very little or not at all in all of that research that I did. You're probably going to be scared to take it out sometimes. It is so prohibitively expensive that it's going to be like your first newborn baby. You're just scared to let anyone else touch it, hold it, be exposed to any sort of elements, dropping it, you name it. For whatever reason, this came out after the Leica Cube, which both has a level and a touchscreen, and this has neither of those. So unless you have a perfectly straight eye, you are almost certainly going to end up with most of the photos you take with this, if you're doing handheld, being wonky and needing some minor to somewhat severe corrections in Lightroom or something. And no touchscreen is not the biggest deal, but when you're in playback and you're trying to pinch in, zoom around, swipe between your photos, it just ends up being a lot slower because doing everything with this little D-pad just takes forever. You're going to be afraid to hand this camera to someone else when you're just taking group photos and they'll say, hey, I'll take a picture of you. Nice. Hey, thanks. Do you want me to take your photo now? Nah, it's okay. Because even if you aren't afraid of them dropping it, you're probably going to think it's pointless because they're not going to know how to focus and take a proper picture with this. This camera has no electronic shutter and caps out at 1/4000th of a second with its mechanical shutter. So if you want to shoot wide open on a very bright sunny day, then you're shit out of luck, or you need to carry around ND filters with you. Problematically, if you're not really paying that much attention to the exposure stuff that the rangefinder little window is telling you, then that could end up messing you about and you come away with lots of overexposed photos if you aren't checking them in playback afterward. Live view works okay on this, but it's really not the optimal way to shoot with it. The overall speed of the punching in when you're changing focus and the peaking is Then compounding this with it being a lot slower to shoot when you're using live view, it's just not the best way to do it, and it's really not designed to. If you buy and own one of these or something like this, you will shoot with the lens cap on more than once. You bring the camera up to your eye, be like, oh, I've got a nice shot here. And then you press shoot, you hear the mechanical shutter go up, and you're just waiting, wondering, why hasn't it gone down yet? Why is my screen black? What's going on? And then you realize, the lens cap's on. So you have to turn the camera off, turn it back on, and then take the shot again that you wanted to in the first place. At some point, either your lens or your camera body will become uncalibrated, and that is going to be maddening because you could use this for one day, could be days, could be weeks of you using this camera before you import all your photos, have a look at them, maybe edit them, want to send them around, and then you realize, they're all just out of focus by just a little bit. And again, that could be because your lens or because your rangefinder mechanism. The rangefinder mechanism, if it's a horizontal alignment, you can tweak this yourself fairly easily with a 2mm Allen key. A lens, depending on what the lens is, you can maybe do it yourself, but otherwise, like me, I had to send this one into Leica. They quoted me 4 weeks, and it ended up taking 8 weeks, which is a pretty standard thing I hear, and it cost $500+. $500. Now, lens swapping can be a bit annoying on this manual focus system. If you use 6-bit coded lenses only, no problems. It's going to auto detect them, no problem. Otherwise, you can manually set a lens based on all of Leica's lenses' previous profiles, no third-party ones. So if I use my Zeiss 50mm f2, I'll just sort of lie and tell the camera that it's a 50mm Summicron. So if I have 2 third-party lenses and I set my camera up for using 50mm f2 Summicron, because I start the day with my Zeiss 50mm f2, and then I go to a Thypoc 35mm after and I forget to change that manual setting, when I go into Lightroom, it's going to have corrections for that 50mm f2, which is wrong for both lenses, but it's going to say that I spent all day and shot all of the photos on a 50mm f2. So if I end up looking at those photos a year later, then it's not going to be an accurate representation of what kind of lens I was using. I found it kind of easy to accidentally cover up the rangefinder patch, and it gets a bit confusing as to why, because you pull up here and then you're not seeing any double images, and it's all a bit purple from my skin tones, and I just wonder what's going on here. And then I'll look, see if it's really dirty or gunked up or something, and then my hand's been covering it this whole time. This camera is a little bit like gym bros having to justify their weight because muscle weighs more than fat. This thing is a lead brick. More accurately, it's actually a brass brick because the top and bottom plate of this are made from brass, with the rest of it being a magnesium alloy. This has it weighing in at 660 grams, and while that's not necessarily that much heavier than other cameras, it's definitely going to be heavier than other cameras this size. And you can also compound this with more older Leica lenses that are also made of brass that can really up the weight of this thing. Seriously, if anyone ever tried to come up and mug me while I was using this thing, I'm okay because I've got a deadly weapon in my hands right here. Like, I'd be worried for them more than I'm worried about me, because I could just beat them with this and do some serious damage. How are you supposed to hold it? What is this? You are definitely going to need to rock a wrist strap or a neck strap for this camera. On the bright side, it is on the smaller side, and you pair it with smaller lenses, you can fit it in pretty small bags, and it can just be a pretty discreet, low profile camera to carry around in your hands and on your person in a bag. But make sure that that bag has some sort of weatherproofing, because this camera is not rated to survive any sort of rain whatsoever. Oh, hey man, how's it going? It's been a while, hasn't it? Bloody oath, mate, it's been ages. Did you catch that game last night? It's a bloody rip. Whoa, man, take it easy. A little warning would be nice. Watch out for the camera. Okay, sorry? What if it exploded everywhere? Jeez, have some respect. The buttons also feel a bit cheap on this. The ones on the left, they feel a bit like DS buttons, if you've used a DS, the original one. And very clicky. The D-pad feels kind of crap for the price you're paying for this thing. Nice shutter button and on and off mechanism. It's a little bit on the louder side. The ISO dial is straight up terrible. I don't know what the design language was for this besides trying to emulate a film reverse winder, but it's a bad design. It's very difficult to get up and down. It's also very slow. I've also heard that some of the earlier models had some issues with this getting stuck or broken as well. This camera and batteries is a little bit like when you're at a club or a concert or whatever with the boys. You've had a few stubbies. It's getting pretty late in the morning. You just want to get home, but there's no Ubers. So you think, Geez, I really just need to get home. Then you have to cop a $100+ taxi ride that you absolutely will regret in the morning. If you're lucky enough to find any new batteries for sale for this camera, you're looking at 310+ bucks. That's crazy. Might be able to get some cheaper on the secondhand market, but then you don't know how old they are. This camera's from 2017. That could be an original battery that barely holds half of its original charge. If you're out and about, you've got your charger and you want to charge it up, well, you're shit out of luck because you cannot charge this with any form of USB charging. So if you want to access the battery, you're forced to remove this annoying film-like bottom plate whose only purpose for being like this is for nostalgia. The experience of shooting with this camera is very cool. I would say it's kind of akin to driving a manual car. There are much more efficient, straightforward, simpler options like an automatic car out there. But some people really, they just love the feel of the manual car and being fully in control of everything. And those types of people, they might really enjoy using this kind of system as well. This camera has no IBIS. It would be nice, but with the long flange distance, it's really not a feasible addition even in the future. That I'd really have to make the body on this camera a bit fatter to include that. And then when you combine this with the mediocre high ISO performance and the difficulties of using a rangefinder at night, which is best used in situations where you can find something that's high contrast to differentiate between the two images. It's just not overly great, and you probably won't be using this much after dark. Dynamic range of this camera is pretty solid, but it does really tend to clip highlights. I basically always have this shooting at -0.7 or minus a full stop to make sure that I'm not blowing out any highlights. Unfortunately, this does lead me to basically putting +1 on all of the photos I shoot on this camera as soon as I import it into Lightroom so that I can get the exposure up to where it should be, which isn't too bad, but then I'm also lifting the shadows quite a bit. That can raise the noise floor quite a bit already. The main metering for this camera is off the shutter. Very unusual. Most cameras, basically all cameras, even the newer M cameras, meter off the sensor, I believe, instead, or something else. That is why it tends to clip the highlights. It's an imperfect system. Often having me shoot at -0.7, -1, so I'm not blowing out the skin tones of my extremely white friends. Auto white balance is also a bit dodgy, pretty often having to change those values for both the white balance and the tint in Lightroom. Colors overall and the RAWs are pretty good. They're editable. They're not the best I've worked with. They do get bonus points for being DNGs, no annoying proprietary formats, but unfortunately there's no compression options to reduce your file sizes. This camera has very weird traits with the auto ISO. It will basically do anything to avoid shooting at ISO 100. I had to end up doing some research for this during the writing of this video actually, and I found on a Fred Miranda forum that it's a patch that Leica put out because the highlight clipping performance is better at ISO 200 for this camera. So there's some other tests and you can have a look at the link in the description, but essentially people do think that the dynamic range performance is better at ISO 200. Very weird, and essentially makes one of the stops on this dial essentially pointless. If using this as your only camera when you're on holiday and you're in a restaurant, cafe or whatever, don't even bother trying to take photos of your food. You will look like an absolute fool. I should take a quick photo. Actually, could you get out of the way? You're in the shot. You know what? I'm just going to use my phone. This camera is an absolute blast to use if you're just walking around, maybe a nice photo walk, environmental photos, some street. But if you really like taking photos of family, friends, pets, it's going to be really tough to recommend this. It's just a bit slow. Like if you're needing to shoot wide open indoors, it's going to be really hard to now focus on people, especially if they're moving around as well. Like try taking photos of your pets indoors. Very, very difficult. If this thing was cheaper, then I would absolutely recommend this as a secondary camera to really go have some fun with on a weekend, that sort of thing, to your main camera. But it's just so expensive.